SpongeBob isn't just a free-spirited fry cook, but he's also the most dangerous serial killer in Bikini Bottom. So, let's talk about the time SpongeBob basically went full-on space invader in the episode Sandy's Rocket. Sandy builds this epic rocket to get to the moon, and when SpongeBob gets wind of this, he decides to explore the moon too. Of course, his partner in crime, Patrick, is all in. But our resident squirrel throws a spanner in the works. Sandy's like, nah buddy, we're not going to the moon. Remember the last disaster with my whirlybird? Next thing, Sandy shows us this eerie graveyard filled with tombstones. Like seriously, it's a whole cemetery. Whoa, stop the boat. Why does Sandy have a cemetery in her backyard? And why does she bring it up when SpongeBob starts talking about flying stuff again? The implication is wild. SpongeBob's little adventure with her whirlybird wasn't just a regular oopsie, but a full-on disaster with fatal consequences. And if that's true, we're not talking about a goofy sponge with a knack for trouble. We're looking at someone who might have caused the end of many lives in Bikini Bottom. Sandy's reaction is telling. She's clearly been through this before and is not about to let history repeat itself. But SpongeBob? He's just as cheerful and oblivious as ever. No guilt, no remorse, just a sponge eager for his next big thrill. And honestly, that graveyard shot, it's not just a joke. It's a dark reminder of what SpongeBob's capable of when things go sideways. Makes me wonder just how many other accidents he's brushed off with his big goofy grin. Next thing we know, our favorite sponge is hijacking Sandy's rocket and turning Bikini Bottom into the site of a fishy alien abduction. SpongeBob and Patrick start capturing everyone in town thinking they're moon aliens. It's like one big bizarre fishing trip where they're just snagging poor unsuspecting Bikini Bottomites left and right. They're locking them up in the rocket's holding chamber like it's no big deal. SpongeBob doesn't even blink an eye while doing all this. I mean, the dude is giggling away while basically imprisoning half the town. Now sure, on the surface, this looks like classic SpongeBob silliness. But if we dig a little deeper, and I mean real deep, this episode shows us a darker side to our bubbly buddy. He's causing all this chaos, but there's zero remorse, zero second guessing, just pure, unfiltered mayhem. It's almost like he's testing the waters, seeing how far he can go without anyone catching on. And honestly, that's some cold-blooded stuff right there. It's almost like Bikini Bottom is lucky he didn't decide to go even further. So, let's return to Sandy's garden's creepy gravestones. Check out this tombstone here with the name Tom on it. I know, you gotta squint a little. You remember Tom, right? Nah, me neither. He's not that memorable, but he's the guy who couldn't wait to get his hands on some chocolate in the episode Chocolate with Nuts. He chases Patrick and SpongeBob down the street like a crazy person for candy bars. The poor kids run for their lives, and I would too. Tom also makes SpongeBob's life miserable during the infamous pizza delivery episode. SpongeBob goes on a wild goose chase trying to get to this dude's house, and when he finally arrives, Tom refuses to pay because SpongeBob didn't bring him a soda, which he never ordered, by the way. Something weird is up with this dude, but how is he relevant to all this? You see, Tom shows up in these episodes all red-faced and ragey, but here's where it gets creepy. The tombstone in Sandy's backyard has his name on it. Yep, our guy Tom might have kicked the bucket in the Whirlybird saga. Let's entertain the idea that SpongeBob, our usually cheery fry cook, didn't just let Tom's nasty behavior slide. No, what if SpongeBob took matters into his own sponge? After Tom makes SpongeBob's life hell too many times, SpongeBob may have decided enough is enough. Maybe he didn't get revenge immediately, but a sponge never forgets. It could be that SpongeBob might have bumped off Tom. Yep, cold, calculated revenge. Here's where it gets really freaky though. Remember how Tom's all red and angry in the earlier episodes? Well, suddenly, Tom's looking a little green. Not with envy, but more like a not-so-fresh corpse kind of green. Coincidence? I think not. More likely, it's our first clue that the real Tom is 6 feet under, and this new guy is just a cheap imitation paid by our little murderer to impersonate Tom. SpongeBob's own little cover-up job, if you will. Okay, so we've talked about SpongeBob and his, let's say, questionable activities. But what about Sandy? She could be in on it all too. Sandy, knowing all too well about SpongeBob's extracurricular activities, could have decided to help her buddy out by covering up his mess. After all, what are friends for? Sandy quietly takes care of the evidence after a mysterious disappearance in Bikini Bottom. Maybe she's even created some super advanced burial technique that ensures nobody finds out. Let's be honest, if anyone could pull off something like that, it's Sandy. With her brains and SpongeBob's enthusiasm, these two could be Bikini Bottom's most unlikely crime duo. That, or maybe SpongeBob threatened her, and she was forced to help him because her invention was half the reason all those people died. Although it was most likely SpongeBob's freaky-ass driving. We all know SpongeBob has a bit of a, let's call it, unique relationship with driving. And by unique, I mean downright terrifying. Every time he steps foot into a boatmobile at Mrs. Puff's boating school, he causes more destruction than a pack of wild anchovies on free ice cream day. And who's left to pick up the pieces? None other than our dear Mrs. Puff. It's never SpongeBob who gets the blame. Oh no, Mrs. Puff always ends up in hot water. In the infamous Mrs. Puff, You're Fired episode, we find out that SpongeBob has failed his driving test over 1,000,000 times. Yeah, you heard that right. To be exact, 1,258,056 times. Mrs. Puff's sanity unravels with each crash and explosion from SpongeBob's driving. We're talking full-on nightmares and hallucinations here, folks. Mrs. Puff is so traumatized by SpongeBob's reckless driving that she's seeing things that aren't even there. There's even a scene in Demolition Doofus where doctors have to tranquilize Mrs. Puff because she tries to kill SpongeBob. Talk about going off the deep end. How often do you have to witness your student turning the streets into a demolition derby before you start losing it? The poor woman is a ticking time bomb of stress and anxiety, all thanks to Bikini Bottom's most dangerous driver. SpongeBob's driving chaos isn't just about a bad student. It's part of a larger pattern of destructive behavior. If we consider that SpongeBob has a darker side, his constant driving disasters could be his way of causing widespread panic and disorder. After all, the more destruction he leaves in his wake, the more chaos ensues, and the more his true nature is hidden behind a facade of goofy antics. What does this mean in the grand scheme of things? SpongeBob's driving record isn't just a list of mishaps. It's a potential indicator of a much deeper, more disturbing issue. If his reckless behavior is part of a larger pattern of chaos, it could be evidence of a more sinister motive. SpongeBob's driving might not just be about failing a test, it might be a calculated part of his plan to wreak havoc, hinting at the maniac hiding underneath. According to the FBI guidelines, mass murder is classified as killing 4 or more people in a single event or a series of events without any cooling off period between the murders. Basically, it's not just about having a bad day, it's about a consistent, disturbing pattern of violence. Now let's bring this back to Bikini Bottom. This underwater city might seem like a whimsical place. Still, it's a small community with a limited population of 538 citizens. Considering what we now know about SpongeBob's history, this makes the Whirlybird incident even more sinister. With such a small community, the implications are massive if SpongeBob is behind these tragic events. Each incident would hit the community hard, making the severity of his actions even more extreme. Let's rewind to an episode in which SpongeBob is treated like absolute garbage. In Whatever Happened to SpongeBob, he's called an idiot boy and repeatedly gets doors slammed in his face. Ouch, this isn't just SpongeBob having a rough day, it's a pattern of abuse. Imagine the emotional turmoil of constant belittling and being discarded by everyone around you. Was this the catalyst for SpongeBob's shift from a cheerful fry cook to a cold-hearted killer? If everyone around you sees you as a joke, it might just push you to show them that you're not someone to mess with, possibly in the most extreme way possible. Not only do the people of Bikini Bottom belittle and bully SpongeBob, they go into a full-blown celebration of SpongeBob's absence in the episode Gone. As if that's not enough, they burn an effigy of him. That's not just a simple party, it's a full-blown mob creating a spectacle. SpongeBob's disappearance is met with cheers and mockery, suggesting he's been a source of major annoyance. If the townspeople celebrate his absence this much, he's obviously been a significant thorn in their side. This kind of public disdain could fuel some seriously malicious thoughts. Suppose SpongeBob is driven by the hatred and scorn of his fellow resident. In that case, his motivation for turning to violence starts to make more sense. These guys seem to only treat SpongeBob well when there's something in it for them. It's clear as day in the episode Porous Pockets. SpongeBob's worth is tied directly to his wealth. When he's rich, suddenly everyone loves him. But when his money dries up, so do his so-called friendships. This fickle affection could seriously mess with someone's head. SpongeBob's self-worth is constantly being dictated by his financial status. It's easy to see how being valued only for his wealth and then discarded when it's gone could create some serious resentment. If SpongeBob feels like people only like him when he's rich, he might take out his anger on those who treated him like a disposable friend. It would make sense that he has little regard for the well-being of his fellow townspeople. And SpongeBob is all too easy to help Mr. Krabs cook up a deadly surprise to deal with a pesky health inspector in Nasty Patty. And we're not talking about a bad burger. This is a burger so grotesque it's literally designed to be a murder weapon. SpongeBob isn't just reluctantly going along with Mr. Krabs' plan, he's entirely on board with the idea of offing the inspector. SpongeBob's enthusiasm for the scheme is downright disturbing. This isn't just about cooking, it's about plotting murder with a side of fries. When SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are later questioned by the police, SpongeBob's nervous breakdown is a glaring red flag. He's shaking, sweating, and stumbling over his words like he's hiding something big. And it's not just the Nasty Patty that has him rattled. If SpongeBob can be this panicked over a single crime, picture the state he'd be in if the cops started digging into more of his dark deeds. This nervousness suggests he's hiding more than just a botched burger. It's a hint of a web of deceit and possibly even more sinister actions lurking beneath his cheerful surface. So, when we look at SpongeBob's readiness to participate in a murder plot and his subsequent freakout when faced with questioning, it paints a pretty grim picture. It's not just about a lousy patty, it's about a willingness to commit crime and a level of anxiety that screams he's hiding a lot more. So yeah, I think SpongeBob is definitely a mass murderer who hides behind a goofy grin. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy who likes cartoons.